I know you've heard about my book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. Every night I come on and I do this little commercial because you need to know about it. If you have waited and you've been listening to this, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to get that book, or maybe I'll get it later. Now is the time. If you're a cop or a mom or a veteran that hasn't been in for a while, if you're a dad or a new college student, a preacher, a mayor, a congressman, or even the president, you need to read Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, because this is the only book and system that teaches you how to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Divide your life or your business or your family up into sectors, and then look at each sector for its unique vulnerabilities. What is it that would attract an attacker to your lunchtime at work, or your home in the middle of the night? Or if you live in New York or some other city, when you walk up and you come to your apartment, you got to walk up. What is it? What are the people that are going to attack looking for? When would the time be that they would look to do that attack? Where exactly would they approach? What avenue of approach, and what vulnerabilities would they take advantage of? It shows you how to look at yourself from that perspective. And once you have that knowledge, it also shows you how to use it to build better defenses, more awareness, and plans of action and mitigation of those vulnerabilities. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It has 2 workbooks that you can get. One of the reviews has said that, these are blank pages for people to fill out. What a genius. Exactly, that's what it is. The beginning of the workbooks refreshes what you learned in Sheep No More, but then it gives you a structure and how you do the target package or threat assessment on yourself, and then take that information and put it in the defense assessment and actually do a defense assessment on yourself. For the kids, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book of pictures with safety and awareness lessons and communication built in. The parents go to teamlittlebigs.com, download the lesson plans, and teach the children from those pictures. The whole system. You can get it and change your life, make it safer, become more aware, and secure your homeland. This is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. All right, now I am coming to you live. Well, not live. I'm recording. What am I thinking? I'm recording live from what town are we in here in Illinois? Manhattan, isn't that crazy? Well, how did I forget that? I keep thinking it's Lockport, but we're in Manhattan, Illinois. So I pretty much drove from Manhattan, New York to Manhattan, Illinois, which is really strange. Shows you how travel on the road, what it does to your brain, that I would forget that we're in Manhattan, but I keep thinking Lockport. But anyway, we had a great rally on Friday with the Will County, is it Republican Club or Will County Republican, what is it?
It's the Will County Republican Organization. Okay. And you're listening to the voice of Nick Ficarello, and I say Ficarello. I can't get away from Italians. They're everywhere.
I thought that was an Irish name.
Is it Irish or is it Italian?
Well, my mother always brought us McDonald's, so I thought we were always Irish.
Well, what is it? Is it Italian?
Yeah, it's Italian.
Okay.
It's actually Sicilian. I think in Latin it means one who dwells by fig trees.
Okay, there you go. Long legacy. And his wife, Barb. Hello, Barb, and she's here.
Hello.
And so Nick is running for Will County Executive, which is, you're kind of like, not really the mayor of all the cities in the county, but you're kind of executive over it that kind of works with the mayors. Is that right?
Correct, and also oversees issues pertain to the unincorporated areas.
Right. Now, before we get started, I'm going to interview Nick, and we're going to talk about his career because he's got an incredible career, and it's like something out of a movie. We were talking earlier about because he's from law enforcement, and I'm from the FBI, and but the stories I have don't even come close to comparing to any of the cops that are around Chicago. The stuff in and around Chicago, these stories are incredible. I just wanted to give an update, though. As of now, recording this, it's Sunday evening. You'll be listening to this Monday morning or Monday day or Monday evening. There's no update on the suspect of the shooting in Portland, where a person from the Patriot Prayer Group was shot by. They don't really know who the suspect is, but the clashes were happening between Black Lives Matter, Antifa weirdos, and these patriots that came out there to support the president. So, if you think it's not dangerous, if you think they haven't gone to guns yet, well, this is twice now in less than a week where they have pulled a gun. In the case of Kenosha, Wisconsin, the guy actually was able to fight back like he was playing a video game and blast two of the bad guys, one guy was a pedophile, the other guy was a rapist, and killed those two guys and shot the third guy in the arm who was a felon who had a gun, and so he shot him in the arm and then ended up getting away. He was has been charged with murder, but it was definitely, looking at the videos, it's self-defense. We'll see what happens. So that's twice in less than a week that these leftists have armed themselves, and then now in the case of what's happened in Portland, the guy's dead. We also have had multiple cases where they've been hit in the head or beat up. We've had cops blinded from lasers, all these things that if on a regular patrol, if an officer or an FBI agent encountered somebody, would have been able to use deadly force. The police aren't there. They're being held back by their leftist mayors or by the leftist chiefs or by the leftist sheriffs. And in turn, what's happening is that the citizens are being put into this position. And I think the debate now is whether or not or when it is time for citizens to pick up arms, which we've all been talking about. We don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. But it appears now as though law enforcement is not going to do anything in these liberal cities because they're being prevented from doing it. And ultimately, people are having to take things into their own hands. We don't know where it goes. That's where the debate is right now. Where do we go from here? Now, I wanted to bring Nick in. They were kind enough. I came out here and spoke and had a great time. Then that was Friday, and then today Nick had it was a fundraiser, and I spoke there, and it was very interesting because not only do you have an incredible background in law enforcement, but what you were talking about, and I want you to tell those same things that you talked about today about the history of the left and the history. People who listen to this podcast, I talk about this stuff all the time, about the reality of communism, about this show that I've been talking about, Turn, where it talks about the Revolutionary War and about how England was occupying or came in here and tried to flee from their tyranny, how they came in and occupied homes and just, it was crazy. What they were doing then is the same thing that's happening now in a lot of ways. And but you gave an incredible history about all these dates and names that really mattered. Let's get to that, but first, just give your background and what you've done in your life.
Well, I was hired as a Will County Sheriff's Police Officer in 1978. Served on the Sheriff's Department till I had 32 years on. From there, I worked as a security director at a local university for a short time, and then when I left the Sheriff's Department, I was retired as a deputy chief in investigations and special operations. And after I left there, I went on to work security as a security director, and then I ultimately got back in a squad car in a suburb of Chicago called Posen. Worked there for approximately 3.5 years. Left there when I decided to run for sheriff, lost the primary election as a Republican, and was eventually offered a position and took that position as chief of police of a town of about 6,500 in southern Will County called Braidwood. Illinois.
So when you ran for sheriff, was that the only time you actually ever ran for something?
Yes.
And what was that experience like?
It was very time sensitive and very time consuming. Both. Yeah. Sometimes you had to be two places at the same time, and it was and my wife stood by me, and she was there with me every step of the way, and she was also a great asset in that campaign.
Did a Democrat win?
A Democrat ultimately won.
A Democrat sheriff. Isn't that an oxymoron? It just sounds weird.
Yeah.
A Democrat sheriff, which if you follow the Democrat Party, you would assume that they're going to follow the Democrat Party line, which means they're going to be anti-gun, which means that they fall into this leftist type of thinking of I don't want to say it I want to say it in a politically correct way because I don't want people trying to say it in ways that I don't mean it, but they look at minority status and they look at these different things first before they look at the law and true equality. The left is caught up in this endless game of blaming and victimization, and I just can't imagine that ideology being a sheriff, which is explain to everybody how powerful a sheriff is, that they may not realize that.
The sheriff in the state of Illinois is the highest law enforcement authority in that state. In the state of Illinois, there's only one person that can arrest a sheriff, and that's the coroner.
Which is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
And the sheriff can take over any case, and in my career I have seen sheriffs in the past take over cases from municipalities, but the sheriff handles all the unincorporated area. The sheriff's department currently also handles contract municipalities. The sheriff handles the jail, and the sheriff also handles the court system. It's kind of like the Marine Corps of law enforcement in Illinois, because he has a law enforcement purpose, he has a court services purpose, and he also has a correctional purpose pertaining to the jail. So it's kind of like the Marine Corps. They do everything, and they are often called in to assist smaller departments, or sometimes some of the larger departments too, depending on the situation.
And were you military or strictly law enforcement?
I was law enforcement. I graduated from high school in 1974. I had a chance to go to West Point or the Naval Academy, and I turned them down like an idiot because I was told that I would only do 6 months active to a year active due to the fact that the Vietnam War was over and that the military was downsizing. So I instead chose a law enforcement career.
So, for those that are wondering what the sound is in the background, it sounds like somebody tip-tapping. That's Hope. So they have 3 dogs. Because I don't know if you realize this, I'm not interviewing Nick over the phone. I brought my studio with me because I'm on the road, and I'm interviewing him live. So the sounds that you're hearing that sound like somebody tap dancing, that's Hope. There's Hope, Lady, and Ginger. Ginger doesn't really come around that much. I think I freak her out. Also, drones tend to freak dogs out in case you get a drone. We found out that today as well. Or yesterday. So I want to congratulate you on not going to West Point or the Naval Academy, because I have not had a good experience with Naval Academy or West Point grads. Listen, there are great guys that are West Point Naval grad or Naval Academy. I don't even want to talk about Air Force Academy. I'm just not big on the academies. I think you should have to serve 4 years in the military before you go into these academies. So also, I'm playing with the levels, so you may hear the levels go up and down here a little bit, but that's what happens when you travel with your equipment. But so let's get into, because I want to go into some of these law enforcement stories as much as you want to go into, but I want to hear you. I want to hear you talk about what you said today, because I find it fascinating about this history lesson that you gave today at your fundraiser. So go ahead and tell that, if you would.
Well, today I spoke about the history of the Republican Party and when the Republican Party was started. The Republican Party was actually started by abolitionists in 1854 in Wisconsin. They were the first party that actually was all based on the abolition of slavery. During this time, they selected candidate Abraham Lincoln to run for president in 1860. In 1860, Lincoln won the presidential election, and the first shots of the Civil War were fired at Fort Sumter in South Carolina, I believe, South or North Carolina, one of the Carolinas. After the Civil War was won by the North and the party of Lincoln, the 13th Amendment was passed, which granted freedom to slaves, outlawing slavery. In 1866, the 14th Amendment was passed, granting due process rights to all citizens, slaves included, and that passed with 100% approval, as did the 13th Amendment. And then the 15th Amendment was passed in 1870, granting voting rights to all freed slaves, and was passed and ratified along party lines, with the Republicans being the party of anti-slavery and pro-civil rights at that time, and the Democrats almost 100% voting against it. And then in 1894, Democratic President Grover Cleveland tried to repeal the Enforcement Act, which were 3 separate bills passed to stop the intimidation at the polls by violence or threat of violence, such as the Jim Crow laws. Mm-hmm. That was enacted by Grover Cleveland, and he was a Democratic president. It didn't pass. It didn't get the traction it was because it was blocked by the Republicans. Jumping to 1958, Lyndon Johnson was considered a Dixiecrat. Dixiecrats were Democrats from the southern states. They were segregationists, and they were racists, and Lyndon Johnson in 1958 decided he wanted to run for president. He ended up being vice president in 1960, but in 1958 he decided he wanted to run for president.
Which at that time, you could have a Republican president and a Democrat vice president.
But it was John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson were both Democrats.
Right.
And so he ran with Kennedy. They won, but prior to that, he changed his mind and tune pertaining to civil rights and decided he needed to start backing civil rights and needed the Black American vote along with the Northern Democratic vote to win. And ultimately, he became president. He was, prior to all this, he was considered part of what the Democratic lawmakers called themselves the Dixiecrats. Johnson, like I said, a U.S. congressman and senator, first being elected in 1937, had voted against every piece of civil rights legislation up until that point. So here we see the Democrats playing politics, not really concerned about civil rights, but concerned about politics first. The Dixiecrats controlled the South up until the 1970s and were segregationists and blocked every piece of civil rights legislation that came on the floor of either houses. Hillary Clinton talked about Senator Robert Byrd, who was a Dixiecrat, old Dixiecrat / Democrat from West Virginia, and also a self-admitted Klan member. Hillary Clinton stated that Robert Byrd was a mentor of hers at his eulogy. So what you see is the fact that for over a century, the Democrats were the racist party, mm-hmm. but through news media and manipulation by the mainstream media, that picture has been portrayed, and also influenced by our college professors, that picture has been portrayed as the Republicans being the bad guys, when in fact the Republicans have always voted for civil rights.
It's unbelievable that this is in. I mean, it's in plain view. I mean, these statistics are not something that are hidden, but yet when people go to college and high school, for that matter, because they got rid of a lot of the history classes and teach social studies instead of civics, and so we don't learn a lot of the stuff that the kids don't learn what they used to, and quite frankly, a lot of times they're taught lies, and this truth is just, even though it's in plain sight, it's buried with false information.
It's the way that they're teaching children and teaching our college students is no longer education, it's indoctrination.
Mm-hmm.
It's indoctrination of their ideology. And their ideology is not true history, it's revisionist history.
When I think about and I see what's going on now, the same thing happens. Like I just was looking at Drudge Report, and they're saying the way that they report it, and Drudge is an aggregate, and it's full of liberal stuff. But the liberals are saying that, and this is very interesting when I think about this. The liberals news agencies are saying that this guy that was shot in Portland, that Trump is instigating violence. Right? They're blaming the people, the person that got shot for the violence. But when I go on Fox News, it's not even a headline on Fox News. How could that be? It just happened yesterday, and it's not even a headline on supposedly the conservative, the biggest conservative network. I mean, the way this stuff goes, like you would think that there would be a counter argument or that the truth would be put out there, but even Fox News has gone to the left far enough to the point where things that happen are buried through false information. And again, it's not that the truth is not there. It's just, it's not being told to people. And media is doing it real time now, whereas this stuff has been buried through history, through over a period of time. But now, real time, something can happen and they just bury it. The question I have for you, though, is when you were in law enforcement all these years, I know you had the same experience I had where you would be somewhere, you see it happening, and then you look at the news report, and the news report is totally skewed.
Yes, even at the local level, I've seen local newspapers becoming more and more skewed towards the Democrat and far left viewpoint.
Yeah. Now, as far as like through the years of you being in law enforcement, how much did crime change over that period of time versus the way that it's changed now? I mean, did it evolve? Because it seems like it's evolved very quickly. Things have changed, especially since we've gone into the war on terror. Like we saw these beheading videos and all these things were revealed to people, and all of a sudden, violence it just became more violent. It became a murder wasn't just a murder. It became more violent and more aggressive. Drug dealing's always been violent and aggressive, but it just seemed like the what's it called? The conscience thought about the importance of life is just gone. It's gone in the inner city and in some of these areas around the country.
Well, actually, I was going to write my thesis pertaining to a certain time frame in the 1960s and the early 1970s. Where the entertainment society, along with the way people perceive good versus evil or right versus wrong, became totally skewed. I love Dirty Harry movies. Everybody loved Dirty Harry movies. Here was a cop that was a good cop, but sometimes he did bad to get the confession or to save the person.
Mm-hmm.
So our view of society started to change as far as what is right and what is wrong. There was a show on probably about 10 years ago called The Shield, which portrayed a law enforcement group that was a drug group. In the very first episode, the hero of the show, Sergeant Vic Mackey, I can't remember what the actor's name was, kills another cop. But throughout the whole season and the seasons after that, Vic Mackey's portrayed more as a hero than as a murderer. And the ratings on the TV program, The Shield, were very high. And I'll admit it, I watched it, my wife watched it. It was different, but it was like everything was skewed. When I was growing up, the good guys were always good and the bad guys were always bad. John Wayne was always good. The Japanese and the Germans fighting Americans were always bad.
Mm-hmm.
They were the aggressors, and we were the peacemakers. They're the ones that started the World War II, and we finished it.
Mm-hmm.
John Wayne, along with other heroes, Superman was always good. There was a there was a movie out, Batman versus Superman. Batman versus Superman, you got two good guys fighting each other. When I was a kid,
it would never
in the comic books, that would have happened.
Yeah.
Now and then we progressed to the video game era, and we have Grand Theft Auto, where sometimes the bad guys are good, sometimes the cops are bad. And all this does is it does not give our youth a clear line of what is good and evil or what is good and bad. And I equate bad to evil because more and more we see more and more bloodshed. The streets of Chicago run red every weekend. Gang members have no sense of what a life is really worth. And the public just seems to acknowledge that this is the evolution of man, and they have to accept it, when in reality, it's time for us to fight back.
I agree with you. So all through these years, how many total years in law enforcement?
1978, total in law enforcement. I believe 1.5 years I was not in law enforcement, and I left Braidwood Police Department last April 2019, so about 42, 43 years.
And what injuries have you sustained in that time?
Geez, I've had a broken neck, I've been shot, taken hostage, 3 concussions. I've had to have surgery on my nose from it being broken so many times that I had a deviated septum. I've had surgery on my right elbow and found out that I had a broken left elbow that was never treated. You just ate the pain and went back to work.
And all that was work related.
Yes.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible the statistics we get about cops dying. More cops die on average now than active military every year.
Yes.
Even in war zone. But most of the cops, well, not most, but a large majority of them, the largest majority of police officers die in car crashes on duty.
Yes. Responding to a call.
Yeah. Were any of yours car crashes? These were active, like when you're in there doing arrests and fighting bad guys.
Yes. Every one of those was fighting somebody. I never had an injury caused from a car crash. All those were, and I guess I was Safe Driver of the Year for Will County on numerous occasions, but all the injuries I sustained were in the process of arrest or in the process of confronting a suspect.
Wow. And you were saying, was that you were talking yesterday about working in the housing? You went back and forth?
When I was at the Will County Sheriff's Gang Unit, I was on loan. A few of us would be on loan to the Chicago Housing Authority Police, the CHA Police.
And they don't exist anymore?
They don't exist anymore.
Who does that policing now?
Chicago Police is the projects, and so we would be on loan, and a couple days a week we would go up to CHA projects and buy drugs in the projects. The response from CHA was that they gave us an officer to work with us at the Will County Sheriff's Gang Unit. We were running into numerous occasions where the same gang members that we dealt with, they were also dealing with.
Right. And we were talking about this, how it's not uncommon when you're on especially a gang or a drug task force, to all of a sudden be crisscrossing with a federal agency working the same case. You're just coming from different directions.
Yes. Yeah. There was a few times where while we're on surveillance and following a particular vehicle or a particular suspect around, we would run into a different federal agency or a federal agency that was working the case. Sometimes we worked the case with a federal agency, and sometimes one federal agency would be working case with us, and we'd run into, if we were working case with DEA, we'd run into FBI surveillance and vice versa. And
I've seen pictures of him when he was younger. He looked like a what they call the Mexican assassins, a Sicario. You had the hair. You could have been something out of a 1970s cop show. So when you walk out, now I look at it, I'm like, I would have looked at you and said you were a cop right away. But they never tagged you as a cop. I mean, they never.
Oh, there were people that would say I was a cop, and or they'd say you have to do. When I was undercover, you have to do this drug, otherwise I'm not going to sell it to you, and you just had to know the right language or the right words to get out of it. And sometimes it wouldn't be appropriate for this podcast, but
yeah.
There were certain things that you learned to say or would say just to get out of not doing the drugs.
So the worst story I ever had that I heard, I mean, I've heard a lot of bad stories because when I was in the FBI, I had all NYPD detectives that were my partners, so I got to hear all their incredible war stories. But this particular story was not with the NYPD, but I'm not going to say where it's from. But there was a guy that was undercover. He was in it, had infiltrated this drug gang, and they were in one of these crack houses. They get a knock on the door, and it was a woman wanting to buy crack, and she was a nurse, and she was wanting to pay for it with a check, and they refused. They refused and told her to get the F out of there and stuff. And so she came back 30 minutes later with her 11, 12-year-old daughter and was going to let them have sex with her for crack. And the guy who was the undercover, he knew that wasn't going to happen. So he threw a fit about it, basically saying, I don't sleep with young kids and this is crazy. And I'm out, if you're going to do this, I'm out of here. And they told her to, he convinced her to go away. And, but he said that was, first of all, that was the scariest he's ever been because he thought he was going to have to get in a shootout to get that 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl out of there. But it was also the most disgusting thing he'd ever seen. And I don't think people, I've also talked to other detectives and I've seen some of this, but I think cops that are on the street, especially ones that are in drug units, they see it on a daily basis. But I've talked to cops who have seen stuff, which you probably have seen, where they go into a house, it's filled with trash. The people are sleeping all day. They stay up all night dealing or doing drugs. They have children. The children walk around. They take craps in their diapers, and wherever the diaper falls on the floor, that's where the diaper stays.
Yeah, that's happened. My wife has worked at the Child Advocacy Center before as a victim's advocate. We have taken money out of our own pocket on a couple of occasions and went into some of these locations where people are living in a motel and there's kids running around and just horrid conditions. And we've made sure that they had food and stuff to eat for the kids. And I remember on one occasion, the parents wouldn't even get up out of bed to the kids let us in.
Ooh. Go ahead.
Okay, we went to the door of the hotel where this family was with these couple little kids, and knocked on the door because we brought them some groceries, like just some fresh fruit and bread and milk and stuff like that. And the little girl answers the door, and she's just standing there, and she's like, "Well, what's that?" And I said, "Well, this is some groceries for you." And we, peeked in there, and you couldn't see the parents anywhere. You could see, like, there was something, like they were hiding under the covers in the bed of the hotel because they didn't want to answer the door, and they let their child answer the door, and it was just a disgusting, filthy mess. And so we ended up calling DCFS to, investigate.
After you had contact with them at the advocacy center,
right? Yeah. So.
Wow, and see, people just don't understand the reality of what's going on. Like, for instance, I don't want to get too much into it right now, but this whole Black Lives Matter thing that's going on, right? We know the group was started by Marxists. We know a lot of people they have their hearts in the right places when they're involved with this. However, you never see them going into these areas and cleaning up these areas. One of the reasons why is, besides the fact that they're Marxists and they're really not interested in that, is because there's only so much you can do in the inner city. And there's only so many people that you can help, that want help, and that will step up to clean up the area. A lot of these people, they've been raised in a hopeless, a no hope situation. Those kids will grow up to be like their parents, most likely, because they're being taught that based on their color or based on where they live, they'll never make it out. And that's not true.
Correct. That's a total, Marxism locks people into a certain class and keeps them there. There's never any hope to advance. If you're a person in a Marxist society that, say, is working in a park district, you're going to work in that park district the rest of your life, and you will be designated where you could live and what type of apartment and where that apartment is. There will never be any hope for you to move up in society to achieve a higher class rating or make yourself better, make life better for your kids. The total idea behind the welfare state, I believe, was the first step by Lyndon Johnson towards a Marxist socialist society by keeping people down and keeping people in a particular class so that they're constantly dependent upon government for their needs. If you're constantly dependent on government for your needs, generation after generation is never going to have any hope to move forward. No hope means no movement, and you're just going to work to maintain the lifestyle you have and never want anything more.
Right. And Lyndon Johnson's very similar to Joe Biden.
Oh, correct. Very, very similar. They're
very
in fact,
scummy,
Joe Biden,
very
I
weird.
would say, is even worse.
You say Joe Biden is worse.
I would say the Joe Biden we're seeing on TV currently is worse.
Well, both of them swim naked in front of their Secret Service agents. Johnson was known to undo his trousers and urinate in front of anybody. He didn't care. Weird stuff like that. You know, I've often said that, and you've probably seen this in your career, that a lot of these people who are in office are people that I personally, I'm not saying I'm the coolest guy in the world, but I think I'm a pretty cool guy. I'm pretty, realistic guy, down to earth. But I would never hang out with these people. I'm not. Most of them look weird. They act weird. And if they were my grandparents, I'd have nothing to do with them. I wouldn't want anything to do with these people. It's very telling that their image matches their weird persona and their weird politics.
I think that also part of it's a power trip for them. Maybe they were underachievers in high school or college, and that now that they have a certain designated amount of power, they feel they could get away with just about anything. And even if it means dropping your trousers and urinating in front of anybody, because you can, because you're the president, that's
a power thing.
Trip.
Yeah, power trip. Yeah. When we talk about the history of the Revolutionary War, the whole history thing, the stats that you went through, those dates, those important dates, and then when you were a cop, did you ever see in all those years, when did you start to see the reality of what's happening with Marxists? When did that become evident to you? Because for me, it wasn't until I got out of the Bureau. That's when I really started to see it.
I became very politically aware at a young age. When I was in the 6th grade, my brother-in-law gave me a magazine called The American Spectator.
Mm-hmm.
And I read The American Spectator, and I saw that they predicted within the next 20 years, 95% of all college professors would be Marxist socialists, no matter what subject they were teaching.
And what year? When was that you read that?
That was in 6th grade. Let's see. That was, 62? No, 60. I was born in 56, so probably around 67, 68.
Right.
60,
So they already knew at that point in time. People were seeing it.
Yes. And when I was working on my master's degree in political science at a local university, I saw it repeatedly that there were college professors that never taught both sides. I had one college professor that was actually ex-military, and he was actually a black conservative, and he was ex-military, and he'd always teach both sides and show both sides. But the other college professors I had would never teach both sides, and I would argue with them. They were my age, and I would argue with them and tell them, why don't you tell these kids the whole story instead of just telling them this indoctrination or this revisionist history? And eventually they would understand where I was coming from, and they would say, well, actually, Nick is correct. It did happen this way. It did happen that way. I remember a specific argument about Lyndon Johnson and how one college professor was expounding the wonders of Lyndon Johnson being great for civil liberties and a great democratic president for civil liberties. I say, hey, time out. Tell these kids the whole story. Tell these kids the fact that up until 1958, he voted against every piece of civil rights legislation. And it took me a while to convince them, to tell them, I don't know if they were afraid of me, that I would just continue to babble in class or what, but they would finally start telling them both sides. And it was an uphill battle.
That's unbelievable that they wouldn't even tell that. I got to find another word besides unbelievable. Everything's unbelievable for me now because it's so... I mean, the thing about all this, again, is that it's in plain sight. They don't hide what they're doing. They just do it, and then they accuse you of being loud or crazy, or in the case of like Trump, where this guy gets shot by a Black Lives Matter or Antifa person, and they accuse the guy, the victim, of being the person that instigate this, or Trump, when they're having riots every single night, and somehow the mayor of Portland is blaming Trump for the violence, and so is Biden. It's the same thing with the virus. These Democrat mayors put these COVID positive patients into these elderly clinics, killed literally thousands and thousands of people, probably over half of the people that have been dead or that have died from this in the United States, and they're blaming Trump for the 180,000 deaths.
It's amazing because and I remember I lived through this in 1968 through 1969. There's the Hong Kong flu. I believe about 110,000 people died in the Hong Kong flu. The population of the United States was about 240 million people. And we didn't shut down society over the Hong Kong flu. I just remember my mother telling me, wash your hands. Mm-hmm. When you go out, wash your hands before you come in and eat. Because the Hong Kong flu was deadly. And I haven't figured out the percentages, but I wonder if you figured out 110,000 versus 240 million versus 180,000 in today's population.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
What is the actual death rate? And also look at the fact that in Illinois, the last time I checked, 48% of all COVID deaths occurred in nursing homes.
Yeah.
A nursing home is not a hospital.
They're not even a rehab clinic. They're really not even nursing anything. What they are is babysitting, a lot of the times, elderly until they die. And that's they make themselves out to be a medical facility, and they're not. They have very few medically qualified people in most of these places.
Correct.
It's
once in a while a visit from a doctor once a day if they're lucky.
Yeah. So what is your goal in seeking, this position as the Will County executive? What brought you to this, and what is it that makes you want to take on that now that you've done the law enforcement, you've been chief of police? What is it about this particular position, and what is it that you hope to gain? What can you gain in that position?
Well, this position is a position of leadership. As the Will County executive, there are 22 or 23 duties that the Will County executive does. One of them is the veto power. Another one is the tie-breaking power in county government.
So when you veto, what would you be vetoing?
I would definitely
things that the mayors do, or
similar to what a mayor would do, depending on the form of government of that particular municipality. In Will County, the chief executive has the power to veto any legislation or any resolution that the Will County board comes up with. They have a power to override with a, I believe, 2/3 majority vote. But the executive can veto any resolution. He could also be a tiebreaker. Mm-hmm. Recently, the previous Will County executive, Larry Walsh, God bless his soul, he passed away. But Larry voted for a 4% gas increase tax. Will County is already taxed at a very high rate. We have a 39-cent gasoline tax in Will County, along with a 4-cent gasoline tax.
Wow.
And
39-cent gasoline tax.
39-cent because we're a Collier County. And Will County does need some infrastructure replacement and infrastructure upgrades, but this is caused by all of the truck traffic from the continuous building of warehousing.
Let me ask you this about unions. I don't want to, I know this is high union area right here, right? A lot of unions here. But is there any potential for union, what's the word I was just looking for here, where unions can progress a little bit, where they, because there's been a lot of companies that have gone overseas or that have literally died because the unions pressed too hard. Is there any type of reform that you think could happen in unions where the reform works, where they work better with the employers? In other words, they can only go so far before they destroy the company.
I would say that one way to advance that cause is through stock sharing, where union members are allowed and and maybe get some extra type of benefit if they start buying stock in the company they work for. They start buying stock in the company they work for, they're going to take more pride in the product, A, and B, they're going to be more concerned about making sure that the company itself doesn't move overseas.
Right.
I believe Southwest Airlines is one of those companies. I'm not sure, but I remember hearing that Southwest Airlines employees were also owners of the company.
Right. That's interesting. That's an interesting solution. See, this is what I'm talking about. When I look at leaders, I look at people who think outside the box. I talk about in my book, Sheep No More, that one of the arguments I had with a senior FBI agent who got mad at me because when I interviewed people, I would always build rapport with them, and sometimes that would take an hour. I would go with the rapport as long as I could, even if I would need to only ask them one question, unless I could go in and felt like I could just get that one question out. But I would build rapport with them, and he didn't like that. And so when we were driving down the road, he pulled over and he said, "You know what your problem is? 90% of the things that you do are outside the box. This is a bureau. 90% of what we do is inside the box." And I told him, I said, "That's the greatest compliment anybody's ever given me."
Yes.
But when a true leader is going to be somebody who manages their experts and thinks outside the box when they need to.
Correct.
So getting back to the Will County position that you're running for, Will County Executive, why did you choose that particular? What was it about Will County Executive that drew you in?
Well, I've had a good run in my law enforcement career. I still want to serve the citizens of Will County. I've had a very good run as a law enforcement officer. I've survived this long, and I thought it was time to move into an elected office that was more legislative, so I could do some more good other than just pure law enforcement. I could be on the cusp of making policy for the whole county or for the unincorporated areas or for whatever.
Does it alarm you with all the stuff that's going on in Portland and Chicago that, you become the Will County Executive, that this stuff will bleed out here into the point where, the meeting that we went to the other day with the fundraiser we did for the Republican Party, they had, several people, 4 people that showed up, were going to try to cause trouble. Are you concerned that how long is the term that you serve as?
4 years.
So 4 years from now, there's no telling what could happen.
Correct. I believe that we're at a time in history that leadership has to step up and prevail. I will veto any resolution or legislative action by the county board, the current county board, if I'm elected, or a future county board to defund the police. Mm-hmm. Part of government's main purpose is to provide safety for its citizens. And defunding the police would equate to a situation where lawlessness would prevail, anarchy would rule the streets.
And you guys are close enough here to Chicago where that very easily could spill out to here.
Well, we have a lot of gang influence in Will County currently, influence from gangs in Chicago. Mm-hmm. At one point, when I was in the Will County Sheriff's Gang Unit, we did a study, and there were more gang members per capita in Will County than there was in L.A. County.
Wow. And L.A. County is much larger than Will County, isn't it?
Correct. Oh, yes. We're looking at you're looking at that time we did the study. It was over 6.5 million people total in L.A. County, and Will County at that time probably had a population of around 500 to 600,000.
So if that's the case, and let's say we look at drug and gang activity and how it spills out from the city, we could assume that the potential for political violence would also spill out into Will County from the city.
Yes, you could see. I would predict that every one of these cities that are democratically controlled and currently are having problems with Antifa and Black Lives Matter are also cities that have a drug problem due to lack of enforcement or lack of social services or some type of oversight that isn't happening. When I worked as the chief of police in Braidwood, we had a policy of arresting drug dealers. In 4 years, we arrested 150. There was 156 separate charges, 122 drug offenders arrested in Braidwood during this time, all for hard drugs. I didn't want to touch marijuana. I didn't want to deal with marijuana. I told my guys, I want the hard stuff, heroin, cocaine, crack cocaine, crystal meth, ecstasy, whatever. And at that time, Braidwood had the highest number per capita death rate in the state. At least that's what I was told by DEA at that time. So we looked at it as a situation that we had to do something, but we knew we couldn't arrest our way out of it. We thought outside the box, and we developed a program. Actually, we copied a program from a police department, Dixon, Illinois, and also Lee County, that provided any citizen help if they knocked on the door of the police department, and we would place them in a drug rehab, even if they were currently under investigation. If they had a warrant for their arrest, we couldn't do it. But if they were currently under investigation, we always tried to seek medical help and detox help for them. Mm-hmm. Times have changed from the 1970s and 80s when there were few drug dealers and mostly users, to now where there are users that also deal. Mm-hmm. And the numbers of dealers have increased dramatically.
What do you think is going to be the biggest thing over the next 4 years that you, as far as the crime goes, or the violence? Let's just say violence, not crime, in the rural areas around Chicago. Is it going to be drugs, or is it going to be political? Do you think that this could spill into where it becomes armed? I mean, it's already armed conflict. We're already seeing it in Portland and other in Wisconsin. Which how far is that from here? Where that happened?
Kenosha's probably about 100 miles, give or take, 110 miles maybe.
So could that happen? Well, let me get back on the question. What do you see over the next 4 years? What type of violence do you think is going to rise? If you had to make a prediction.
It depends who wins the election for president, and it depends in this state. If the Democrats regain power or continue to keep power, mm-hmm. or if the Republicans regain some type of power locally and also in state government along with the presidential election. If the president wins re-election, my prediction is that we will see a spike in political violence, which will be not held back, a spike in political violence which will be put down because the police will be allowed to be the police and handle it. If the Democrats win, we'll see a spike in political violence. We'll see a continued rise in political violence along with more drug dealing and more violence on the street from gang members who are dealing drugs.
So it's going to be bad either way. My worry though is because I'm a big Trump supporter. He gets reelected, and the Republicans or the conservatives in general don't show up to the polls like they didn't for the last congressional race, and we lose not only the House, but we lose the Senate, and then locally we lose a lot of things. That's the problem. And I keep saying this over and over. I don't like the two-party system. I don't like it. I would rather. I mean, in a perfect world for me, it's not a utopia of communism. It's a utopia of responsible citizens who don't take their citizenry or their freedom for granted, and people who understand who's a threat to the country, and they don't vote for those people, or they push good people forward. But we have the two-party system. We got to go with that. So I vote Republican. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that the Republicans don't get up enough and go vote when they could have a landslide in every election if they did. Even where AOC in the Bronx, in her district, which kind of goes into Queens and the Bronx, she 16,000 votes. 16,000 votes got AOC, the loudest weirdo in Congress, her position. And there's more than 16,000 conservatives in New York City and in her district, but they don't show up to the polls.
I think it's very disheartening that they don't show up to the polls. I also think that independent voters are the key to win any election. Mm-hmm. And independent voters have a tendency to vote for the person more than the party because they're thinking old school, that there's still some decent people in the Democratic Party that they would vote for. And I'll bet I have on occasion voted for a Democrat locally on occasion because I thought he or she was a better person or candidate. But those days seem to be getting numbered and happen less. I try to vote in every election I can. So does my wife, because it's a right that we have in this country, and it's a free election system. It's not a system where you are forced or you only have one party rule to vote for, such as in the old Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. But we have a system of free choice here, and that's one of the things that makes this country so great is our freedom of choice, which is all part of liberty.
Yeah. But liberty is a very frugal thing. Liberty, freedom, the pursuit of happiness, all that goes away if communism gets into. I don't understand myself. I've had this discussion with Louis Gohmert, who's a great and I think one of the best congressmen we have, and he says that there are laws on the books against communism and socialism. They're just interpreted different, but I don't know why we just don't have laws that blatantly say there is no other form of government besides what the Constitution lays out, period. I don't know why we don't do that, because it seems, and I don't know why states don't do it. States should be doing that as well.
Yes. I think it needs to start at the state level. I'll go one step further and say I don't know why some of these organizers of Antifa or Black Lives Matter that are calling for the overthrow of this government aren't arrested for treason.
I agree. The treason is a weird. Oh, so here's the other problem. Lawyers write all these laws, right? And so they write them in ways that are very vague. Treason is written in a strange way where, because I've had this debate before with several liberals talking about how this is treason or that's not treason. They say we have to be in war for treason to be used, for that charge to be used. But we are in war. We're in a domestic war. And I think that it's easy. It should be easier to prove treason now than ever, because you have to have, two witnesses, and I don't know I can't remember all the ways that they say that you have to, things that you have to have in order for treason to be charged. But it seems like it would be easier now because nobody's hiding what they do.
Correct, and I'm sure I would guess that under federal law, that besides treason, there could be possibly
insurrection is another one,
a lesser offense where you don't need as high of a standard for prosecution.
But I think the penalty needs to be extremely high. Extremely high. Let's see. What else can I ask you? Anything else that you want to point out about this position and about running for a local position? I mean, most people, let's be honest, most people only concentrate on the presidency. Some voters concentrate on congressmen and senators. Most do not concentrate on state and local politics at all.
I agree.
How do we change that?
We have to make our system of government was founded by the fact that our founders felt everyone should make an effort to be aware of what was going on. It's a system of government that does not or should not be delegated to a certain select few or a certain select elite. Our system of government is based on a point of law where one person, one vote in a Republican form or a republic form of government. If we had one vote per each law, we would never get anything done in this country to move this country forward. In other words, a true democracy means that you vote as a citizen on every issue that ever comes forward, and that would take forever to accomplish anything. So our forefathers thought that the best way to do things would to be elect people to represent us, but we as citizens of this country have to be aware of what's going on. And if the people we elect are not following what we need or what we would like them to do, they should be voted out. Mm-hmm. We have a group of people in the Democratic Party currently that I believe think that elitism is the way to go, very much like Woodrow Wilson during his term in the early 1900s, just prior to World War I. He was an elitist, and he thought that people were too stupid to make decisions on their own. And I have more faith in the American public than that. I wish that we would go back to, and I think it all starts in schools. We need to go back to teaching children civics. We need to go back to teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we need to quit teaching them all the other things that they don't need to know about until they're much older.
Yeah.
We don't need to know that, these kids don't need to know that there are 57 different genders at age 10.
Or teaching 5-year-olds about masturbation, which they've done.
Yes.
Which they do. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
Where is this educational system going? I don't want my tax dollars going for that. I want my tax dollars going to teach children things that they could use down the road, not how to masturbate or, how many different genders there are. When you wake up in the morning and look down when you're going to the bathroom, that's what you are.
So even after all this stuff that you've been through in law enforcement, all these, seeing all the just the degradation of society and all these things, you still have faith in the American experiment and in the citizenry.
I still have faith in that. I still have faith in family values. I still have faith that my wife will be here when I get home from a hard day's work, and I'll be there for her when she gets home from a hard day's work. And I think that's what America's been built on, family values and family values that also extend out to your neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, that's
also I believe that we have to get away from not teaching about God. We got away from teaching about God. I remember a Christmas pageant being about Christmas and the birth of Christ when I was in grade school. Mm-hmm. Now you can't even say Christmas. When I was in grade school in first grade, second grade, there was still a morning prayer. Some people might not like that, but we are a Judeo-Christian country that was found on the basis of the Ten Commandments and Judeo-Christian principles.
And predominantly a Christian nation.
Correct.
So I want to talk, anything else you want to mention about the position that you're running for, like your websites, social media, any of that stuff?
Yes. If you want to know more about me, my Facebook is @electficarello, Ficarello.
That's what you search for.
Oh, that's what you search for. Okay. Thanks, Barb. And where's my website?
His website is electficarello.com. And if you didn't hear the spelling, it's F as in Frank, Icarello.
Ficarello.
Ficarello. And also one more thing. There are 2 genders.
Well, let's talk about this real quick before we go. So you guys have 3 rescue dogs. And you're like me, dogs mean a whole lot to you. And I've heard that the rescues are running out of dogs now and cats. Like people are going and adopting these animals, and that's one of the things that helping people get through a lot of this stuff. This is something you guys have done for a long time.
Yes, it is. We rescued our last dog, Ginger, right during the first COVID time back in the middle of March. Mm-hmm. But we have 3 dogs now, and we got our first one in 2010, Holly, but she's passed away. But we just seem to love to have dogs, the kind that most people don't want to adopt for, they're not puppies or they're older, mm-hmm. or they have problems, but we just...
Or one eye like Like a lady?
Like lady, yes. Anyway, we love them very much.
So what would you, when people are going to look for rescue dogs, what is it about these that clicked with you, and what do you recommend with people when it comes to rescuing a dog?
Well, I think it depends on if you have children and, you know, I don't know, I guess.
Well, not the mentality, but
if you have time, you have to have, you know, time to give them, take care of them.
Did you take your dogs? So the way I picked out, I had Rico and Jesse. I got Rico first, and I took him with me to meet other dogs. As soon as he met Jesse, it was like a match made in heaven.
Yes, you definitely have to. If you have other dogs, you have to bring them over to the rescue place and have them meet each other and make sure that they get along. And you know
they interface.
Yeah, you don't want to have growling and problems and biting or anything like that. Yeah. So,
and has it been a challenge, or has it been fulfilling? I mean, it's been fulfilling, but has it been a challenge?
Yes, it's been a challenge at times. That's for sure. Ginger is where she came from. She was pretty much left outside with some other dogs and had very little human interaction. So she doesn't really want to go outside. She thinks we're going to leave her out there, I think. So there's a lot of pee pads around. But that's okay. You know, there's no carpeting, so it helps.
Yeah.
She's a good girl.
Well, God bless you guys for rescuing these dogs. And I know cats, too. Listen, I was joking around today while we were speaking about dogs and cats. I've had dogs and cats my whole life. And I always tell people, you know, if you're having a hard time in life, before you go see a doctor about some drugs to get over it, go get a dog or a cat. Go to the pound and rescue one of these animals. And I think a lot of the times it'll help you tremendously. And really, for me, it's always been easier to have two dogs than it is one, because they take care of each other. They're pack animals. We're pack animals. And when you got to go to work or something, they're there together. It's just much easier mentally for them.
True. Yeah. Absolutely.
They play off each other frequently, and when we come home, sometimes the house is a mess. And they don't pick up their toys.
Yeah,
we've tried to teach them how to pick up their toys and put them back in their toy box, but they don't.
Which I will say this: last thing about the dogs is when you buy dog toys and they say made in China, you have to be careful with that, because there's regulations. This is what's so crazy about our government. There's regulations about toys that are made for children. For toddlers, but there's no regulation on these dog toys.
That's a really good point.
So they're made in China. You don't know what's in them. They chew on that stuff. That's one of the things I think it probably gave my dog cancer in her mouth, was because she always had a ball to chew on, a squeaky ball or a squeaky toy, and majority of those things were made in China. So just remember that there's no regulation on those. And if you have children and those things are around, there's no regulation on them.
That's one thing all pet owners should consider, and maybe we need to start making more things, including dog toys and children's toys here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, there's more corn here than I've ever seen in my life. Corn everywhere. All right, that's about it. Anything else you want to say at all?
Appreciate this opportunity, and very, very happy that you came out to visit us and support our Republican Party and our candidacy.
You got it. My pleasure. And listen, so I'm going to cut it there, folks. And I got to tell you that I think going on the road like this and meeting people, I know a lot of people can't go on the road and it's difficult for you to get out. But one thing that I get to do when I'm out here on the road is I get to meet people and have a conversation with them. And I do think that is one of the things that is missing right now. As all this stuff starts to happen and all this political violence is occurring, I keep getting the questions over and over again from people. What do we do? The very first thing, as I always say, is you need to start having dialogue with each other. I've come 1,000 miles to have dialogue with these people. I'm going to continue to go to different locations, but you and your neighborhood and your neighbors need to start broaching this subject with each other, because ultimately you, the citizen, are going to save this country. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.